Hello, WRDSB students. Welcome back to another video of Now You Know. Today, I'm hoping to shed some light on the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism motion that will be brought to the board table this upcoming Monday, December 12th. I have had members of the student body ask me questions about the motion, and I realized that there are many who are unfamiliar with the topic, even though I think it's one that is very important. So I'm grateful to welcome Sheryl Nestel from Independent Jewish Voices and Nur Watad from Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. Sheryl, could you please introduce yourself for us today?
Sure. I am a retired sociologist who taught for many years at University of Toronto in the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. Mostly what I taught is about racism and anti-racism. I have been a member of Independent Jewish Voices for 15 years, their steering committee for 11 years. I've been involved in Palestine solidarity activities for many decades. I lived in Israel-Palestine between 1973 and 1988. This is basically my full-time job is doing Palestine solidarity activism from a Jewish position. And Independent Jewish Voices is an organization nationwide. We have 18 chapters. That is a human rights organization focusing on Palestinian solidarity and rooted in the Jewish traditions of justice. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Sheryl. Nur, could you take us away right now?
Absolutely. My name is Nur Watad, and I'm a Palestinian Canadian. I was actually born and raised in Jerusalem, Palestine, and I lived there for 14 years of my life. And currently, I just graduated from Western University, and I studied media information technoculture, and I was also, for the past 4 years at Western, I was the president of the Palestinian Cultural Club, and currently I work for Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. And CJPME's mission is to enable Canadians of all backgrounds to promote justice, development, and peace in the Middle East, and here at home in Canada, especially when it comes to educating others about the Palestinian cause.
That is wonderful. That is lovely to meet both of you.
Same here.
Yes, I'm very excited for today's conversation. To kick it off, I would actually like to read the motion that is being brought to the WRDSB board table. And before I do that, for full disclosure, I myself am Canadian Arab, and so advocacy for the just Palestinian cause is one of my core values. But I will act as if I don't know what I know, pull the motion, go through it, and together we can see what the problem is. So this is the motion as it was read during a September board meeting. Whereas the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IHRA, is an international intergovernmental organization composed of the governments of 35 member countries, including Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, France, Germany, Argentina, Spain, Norway, Sweden, Finland, with 10 additional observer countries, including Brazil, Turkey, El Salvador, New Zealand, and Uruguay, and the Organization of American States. And whereas the working definition, WD, of anti-Semitism published by the IHRA was endorsed as the official policy of the Government of Canada on June 27, 2019, and whereas the IHRA WD was adopted by the Government of Ontario on October 26, 2020, and also by the governments of British Columbia, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Alberta, whereas the IHRA WD does not restrict criticism of the policies or actions of the State of Israel, the advocacy for the human rights and national aspirations of Palestinian people, therefore be it resolved that the Waterloo Region District School Board adopts and recognizes the IHRA WD as its operative definition of anti-Semitism, guiding its staff in the administration of its operational policies, including its human rights and equity policies. All right, so I'm reading this motion. Sounds good. We don't want anti-Semitism in our region, right? This sounds like a good motion.
Yeah.
Right? I did notice, though, the IHRA's definition itself is not included in the motion. So can we go through that and see what its problem is?
Well, I can read you the actual definition if you think that would be helpful.
Of course. I'll put it on the screen for a visual, and you can go ahead.
Okay, so the actual definition, and I'll tell you where the problems lie. So anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. So, this is a pretty, non-debatable definition. I don't think it's a very good definition, but neither do I think it's a very terrible definition. The problem lies in the fact that there are 11 examples of anti-Semitism appended to the definition, 7 of which talk about criticism of Israel. So while the actual definition is not particularly problematic, except that it's very vague, it's when you come to these examples that we run into problems. And I can go on a little bit about that. And certainly from the perspective of Palestinian human rights, this is a very problematic, these examples are extremely problematic. So it first of all, it ignores the many legitimate, I mean, we're not reading all the examples, but I can mention some of them in a minute. It doesn't get into the many legitimate non-anti-Semitic reasons for denying self-determination to Jews and others, such as aversion to nationalism. If you oppose nationalism, you are going to be accused of anti-Semitism because you oppose an exclusive Jewish state. So the criticism is that you're opposing a Jewish state, the only Jewish state in the world, for a group that has been historically marginalized. But the fact of the matter is that you really should be saying a Jewish state that excludes the Palestinian, the indigenous residents of inhabitants of Palestine from having the same rights as Jews. So this is very, very problematic. Saying that Israel has the right to exist. Israel doesn't have a right to exist if it infringes upon the rights of others. So this is a really big problem. And there are many other examples, like calling Israel a racist endeavor. So one cannot do that, even though there is enormous amount of historical evidence to the contrary, going back all the way to the origins of Zionism itself, but also in terms of 1948, whether you call that the Nakba or the War of Independence. Those who were vanquished and expelled and turned into refugees were Palestinians, and that was, the Palestinians paid a price for the establishment of a Jewish state. So, not being able to say that seems so preposterous. And certainly in Canada, we can say that the Canadian state was founded on the expulsion and genocide of Indigenous people. Why can't we say the same thing? That doesn't seem to make anybody nearly as upset as when you apply the same principles to Israel and Palestine. So you can say Canada is a settler colonial state, but when you talk about Israel as a settler colonial state, it becomes a racist expression or an anti-Semitic expression.
Thank you so much for that, Sheryl, and for going through and walking us through the examples. Nur, what are your thoughts?
Well, as Sheryl said, I definitely 100% it's problematic. It is meant to silence Palestinians in a way. Yes, the definition is not very precise, which again is very problematic because I believe that they're avoiding the actual term in defining it for what it truly is, just so they don't receive the backlash that they know that they're gonna get. So I feel like they're just keeping it surface level. I feel like they're keeping it very non-problematic in a way, just so we don't target them. But in many ways, it promotes the silencing and the censorship of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause, and not being able to be outspoken about it. And I've seen it personally in my own life, and in my own life as a student at a Canadian institution where IHRA was adopted. I've seen that silencing and that censorship aimed towards us, just because IHRA was very much present in that. So 100% problematic, and it's meant to silence Palestinians in every possible way.
Mhm.
Just briefly, even though the IHRA has not been adopted on most of the campuses, in fact, the Canadian Association of University Teachers had a unanimous vote in their General Assembly against adopting the IHRA on any Canadian university campuses, which was a huge victory for us, and we were really glad for it. But many of the people we interviewed, professors in particular, said that they are very, very nervous about the IHRA being brought in for fear of it causing them to have to change their syllabi, to take certain kinds of readings off the syllabus, that they might be, prevented from teaching certain kinds of courses, from expressing certain kinds of things. In fact, one of the members of the group that brought the CAUT resolution forward recently had his slides from his class where he teaches settler colonialism reproduced in a report by one of the pro-Israel organizations targeting teachers who teach about Palestine. So there's one of the things that we noted in our report was that many of the professors are under surveillance by some of the pro-Israel campus groups. So if the IHRA, and people are self-censoring. So in anticipation of being targeted, professors, students as well, self-censor. And that's even without the IHRA being brought in. So one can only imagine if the IHRA were actually implemented, and I can give you examples of how that's happened in Germany and the UK, then the suppression would be much more severe, and the punishments would probably be much more severe as well. So it's not just the actual document itself, but the threat that is actually causing people to behave differently and to think differently and to suppress expressions about Palestinian freedom, about the Palestinian narrative. And it's very, very disturbing, even without being implemented. It's disturbing. Its very presence is a threat to a lot of people. If I can interrupt for a second and just tell you about IJV, Independent Jewish Voices, released a report in October called Unveiling the Chilly Climate, the Suppression of Speech on Palestine in Canada. It's a 100-page report. I'm one of the authors. It took us a year and a half to write. We interviewed 80 people in 21 universities in 7 provinces. And what we found there, I think, is really significant for this debate here. And that is that the ways in which the Palestinian narrative is suppressed, where advocates for Palestine have been punished and marginalized and harassed and targeted, is quite disturbing. I highly recommend anybody who's interested in this to go to the Independent Jewish Voices website, www.ijvcanada.org, and download the report and have a look. It's been endorsed by 12 of the most prominent pro-Palestinian scholars basically in the world. And it is very, very disturbing.
Thank you so much to you both. The new Kinsey's feeling very educated now. Imagine for a moment that this motion does pass, the implications of what this definition will be. Will the student be disciplined for being anti-Semitic? What is going to happen to this teacher?
In every way, they will be called out for it. They want to slowly erase our history.
There is ample historical evidence to the contrary, much of it produced by Jews and Israelis. There is a really intentional dismissal of the actual historical record.
They got laid off. absolutely terrifying for teachers who are vocal about this.
This is such a dangerous, road to walk for so many people. Tweeted something and was just fired.
That will close down and shut down our club. They'd come to us and they'd be like, that's not the map. You guys are spreading propaganda.
I think a lot of people say, I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. It creates such an atmosphere of tension.
They'll just be like, you guys are young, what do you know?